In The Phantom Menace, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan have to make an emergency stop on Tatooine to find fuel for their starship. It is here that they encounter a Vergence in the Force, the Chosen One, Anakin Skywalker. Jin is stubborn about letting this opportunity go to waste, and he frees the slave and brings him back to Coruscant to be trained as a Jedi. The rest is history. As we all know, Anakin's life brought about pain and destruction, and he was the undoing of the Jedi Order. So how would things have changed if Qui-Gon hadn't discovered Anakin? And perhaps Grand Master was the Jedi to stumble across the boy. Let's begin today's story on Geonosis, a nearby planet of Tatooine. Yoda is on a mission investigating a dark cult who have been causing issues in the Outer Rim. He had finally tracked them to Geonosis, where he planned his attack, igniting his lightsaber and thrusting forward. However, as the Grand Master leaped into battle, he is hit with a blinding Force vision which shows a powerful Force entity culminating on a nearby world. He can smell the Force and knows this is unlike anything he has ever felt before. He quickly evades capture or injury by the Dark Bandits before getting into his ship and going to Tatooine. As he arrives, he follows his senses to a pawn shop where he locates a young slave boy named Anakin. Taking a midichlorian test, Yoda discovers that Anakin has more midichlorians than anyone in history, even himself. Just like Qui-Gon, Yoda would quickly summarize that this is the prophesized Chosen One, destined to destroy the Sith and bring balance to the Force. This worried Yoda, and he knew that the Chosen One must be trained in the Jedi arts to be able to defeat the Sith. I truly don't think that Yoda would make a big deal about Anakin being 9 years old if he was the one to find him. He knows the true importance of Anakin and how if he passes on this opportunity, he may fall into the hands of the dark side, or won't be able to protect the Republic from any rising darkness. Because of this, the Grand Master takes him back to Coruscant, where he vows to train the boy himself to fully realize his powers. The Jedi Council wouldn't have any reservations and wouldn't argue against the Grand Master. A lot of the prejudice towards the idea of Anakin being trained was because it was Qui-Gon who presented him. Qui-Gon had openly defied the Council several times, and the Council were used to his irregular gambits. Under Yoda's tutelage, Anakin would grow extremely powerful. Yoda would wait longer than the ordinary Jedi to give Anakin his weapon, spending the better half of an entire year simply instructing the Chosen One in the ways of the Force. He taught him how to gain control and composure around his powers. Anakin was quickly able to lift objects, develop his senses, use the Force to enhance his movements, and even have a handy mind trick up his sleeve. He was natural, and his Force attunement was high. Yoda found that he was simply a guide to Anakin more than an actual teacher. He may show him the basics of completing a Force ability, but then Anakin's natural affinity to the Force takes over and he exceeds expectations. Before long, they were already in the training rooms where Yoda would throw rocks and boulders towards Anakin and make him defend himself, only with the Force, no physical weapons. Yoda was a true believer that the lightsaber was simply an extension of the Jedi, but most of the powers should stem from their connection to the Force. This is why the Grand Master wields a green lightsaber to demonstrate his commitment to this phenomenon. The Jedi Masters on the Council were amazed at how fast Anakin was progressing. But the students in his class and year group were jealous and mean, casting Anakin as an outcast and not socializing with him. Although Anakin didn't like this, he simply continued his work and grew stronger. When the time was right, Yoda took Anakin to Ilum, where he would find his Kyber crystal. After confronting his past traumas inside the Kyber cave, Anakin would locate his crystal, and as he placed it into the hilt of his lightsaber and ignited the blade, an emerald glow was emitted. It was clear that Anakin was the Chosen One. No one could deny it. Not the Council, not Windu, no one. His powers were elite. In this timeline, Qui-Gon would still die at the hands of Maul before Kenobi sliced the Dathomirian in half. However, a change would occur with Palpatine. After learning about the existence of the Chosen One, his initial thoughts were to bring Anakin to the dark side to help overthrow the Republic. But when it was made official that Yoda would spearhead Anakin's training, it would be impossible to manipulate Anakin and even get minutes alone with the boy. He had to abandon that original idea and change to something different. Over the years, Anakin Skywalker grew astronomically powerful. His powers in the Force were unlike anything ever seen, and by the age of 16, he was stronger than many Jedi Masters. He and Yoda sparred most days, and Anakin sometimes even won. His skills as a Jedi were exemplary, and Yoda had trained one of the strongest Jedi in history. Another thing that made Anakin so strong was his ability to control his emotions. As Yoda was his master, he developed mental strength on an unprecedented level. Yoda took this part of Anakin's training very seriously, considering Anakin's grim past, understanding that the boy would have several demons to draw upon in times of rage. He instructed Anakin to use his past for good and not let it consume him. Anakin became stoic and he viewed the world through a harsh lens. Anakin was able to hear poor news and not be emotionally reactive, instead simply focusing on what the next best steps were. This developed Anakin into a commendable Jedi, and by the time of Attack of the Clones, he was far greater in strength, mental abilities, force powers, and just greater across the board. This isn't to say that Obi-Wan was a bad master, but compared to Yoda and his rigorous tutelage, there is no comparison. Just as in Attack of the Clones, Anakin is sent to protect Senator Amidala. Unlike the original timeline, however, this would remain strictly professional. The two never met a decade prior on Tatooine, and Anakin hadn't ever communicated with the senator. What was clear was that the two had chemistry, and clearly worked well together. But ultimately, at the lake house on Naboo, it was decided that this wouldn't go any further. Padme cared too much about her career, and Anakin a Jedi. Anakin's wild tendencies to break the Jedi code and go rogue were not clearly as evident because of Yoda's training. The Chosen One had reached balance, and he didn't feel the need to begin a romantic relationship to sustain himself. Anakin would still receive visions of his mother dying, and when he investigated and located her, she died in his arms. I do still think at this moment, Anakin's emotions from his younger self would seep through and he would slaughter the Tusken Raiders. Yes, Yoda had trained Anakin to contain his emotions and think about the best next steps instead of what he should feel emotionally. But I think the key difference here is how much this relates to his past. What would be different though is that after this mission and what happened on Geonosis, Anakin would tell his master. He would explain how the Raiders tortured and murdered his mother in cold blood and how he got his revenge. Anakin was ashamed of himself. In the original timeline, after this event, Anakin told Palpatine, and the Chancellor reinforced his actions, saying that he needed to do this and that his mother would be proud of him avenging her. But Palpatine was serving an ulterior motive. Yoda would condemn Anakin and explain that what he did was wrong. He would use this chance to instruct his apprentice in the ways of the Jedi Code. Killing out of hate and anger is not the Jedi way. The only reason a Jedi would kill is to protect others. Yoda was sympathetic to his apprentice for losing his mother, and he understood that no other Jedi had a connection to their parents. But Anakin had to come to terms with what happened and move on. Focusing on emotive connections is a weakness for the Jedi, and Anakin, being the Chosen One, would have this hanging over his shoulder. As the Clone Wars began, Anakin would become a master to Ahsoka Tano. This would prove to be a challenge for Anakin, but ultimately due to his greater strength and wisdom, he was able to be a better teacher to his apprentice. He would instill in her the knowledge and skills to win battles, as they would go on countless campaigns together. Anakin would become a highly respected Jedi general, and prove to be one of the most successful leaders in the war. His battle record compared to other Jedi was unmatched, and the Chosen One was proving most resourceful. Because of this, during his first year in the war, and pushed by the backing of Yoda, Anakin Skywalker became the youngest Jedi Master in history of the Order at only 19 years old. The war would rage on for many years as Separatist droids fought the Republic clones. Behind the Separatists was Palpatine, who had orchestrated the entire war to serve his own agenda of crushing the Jedi. Since Palpatine couldn't turn Anakin to the dark side, his plans had to change. He still focuses on having Order 66, but Anakin is a big issue. At first, Palpatine believed that he should kill the boy when he was young and untrained at the temple. But after a few attempts, he realized that getting anywhere near the boy alone in a place to kill him was impossible. He was tied to the hip of Yoda, and after a couple of years, Anakin had become too strong to take on alone, and would have been a massive risk to ever fight the boy. At this point, Palpatine had trained Dooku as the next in line in the Sith lineage, but he never saw him as his true apprentice, simply a means to an end. Around the beginning of the Clone Wars, Palpatine would take control over Asajj Ventress, believing in her potential power if she was ever trained properly. This came after seeing her connection with former Jedi Quinlan Vos, who had recently departed from the Jedi Order and turned to the dark side to be with the love of his life. Sidious found this arrangement intriguing and believed he could use their love for one another to his advantage. Both darkside users joined him, and he would begin their secret training in the Sith arts. This would continue simultaneously to the war, and within a year or two, they both became extraordinarily more powerful. Sidious instructed them in the ways of Sith lightning, Force choke, and how to hone their hate into power, but also their love for one another to drive their strength. He forged the couple into vessels of the dark side, and their power was true. Through training together and going on missions with each other where they slaughtered Jedi and clones alike, their relationship only deepened and their love for each other and the dark side grew stronger. In their mind, they could take over the galaxy with Palpatine's help, and then when the galaxy was theirs, they kill Palpatine and rule as Emperor and Empress. Their presence on the battlefield could be felt, and the Clone Wars became the most deadly war in history. Under the leadership of Ventress and Vos in some battles, the Separatists put themselves in a far greater position than the original timeline. They won the Battle of Christophsis, Ryloth, and they were making advances in the Outer Rim. Their progress was surprising, and for a moment, Palpatine wondered if they could win the war organically. However, Palpatine knew that he had to wait until there was enough discontent for the Republic and Jedi in the galaxy for him to begin his true plans to take over with Order 66. The galaxy had to be ready to welcome a change of leadership and the rise of an empire. But they weren't there yet. The war raged on for many years and it was very back and forth. Anakin conducted several campaigns with his apprentice and master. Yoda and Anakin were a deadly duo, two of the most successful Jedi in the galaxy working together on the battlefield. Yoda's innate knowledge of warfare combined with Anakin's unworldly power and strength led to collaborations of beauty. They never lost a battle. But Yoda spent most of his time at the Jedi Temple and only engaged in campaigns which were truly important and right for him. On the other hand, Anakin spent most of his time on the battlefield. In Revenge of the Sith, Anakin and Obi-Wan go to the Invisible Hand and kill Dooku and rescue the Chancellor. But in this story, Yoda would accompany his apprentice to the starship where they locate the Chancellor. The battle with Dooku would go similarly, with Anakin quickly gaining the upper hand and severing the Count's hands from his wrists. As he placed the blades around his head, Palpatine was eager as he wondered what the Chosen One, whom he had little connection to, would do. But just as Yoda expected, Anakin simply arrested Dooku and took him back to Coruscant as their captive. In Republic custody, Dooku would be interrogated and questioned about the Separatists, upcoming plans, anything that could help the Republic. The Jedi wanted to know who Sidious was. They knew that Dooku was the apprentice. The Master had been lurking in the shadows ever since the Sith revealed themselves all those years ago on Naboo. Dooku would remain silent about Sidious and never let any information slip. While he despises Palpatine's manipulation and knows that Palpatine was just using him, he fears the Sith's retaliatory power. Also, Dooku believes that the Republic and Jedi are flawed and considers them unworthy of winning the war without deep reform. With Dooku imprisoned, Palpatine starts grooming Ventress and Vos as his true Sith apprentices. He abolished the rule of 2 and allowed himself to have 2 apprentices, believing this could be the final key to allow him to take over the galaxy. Ventress and Vos's power was unmatched, and they were both able to defeat most Jedi in combat, bar the most powerful in the Order, like Anakin, Yoda, Windu, and Plo Koon. But for the most part, they were unparalleled. With Dooku out of the picture, they took over his responsibilities and had more involvement in the war than ever before. The impact of this was felt almost immediately, with decisive wins on the Rishi Moon and Alderaan. Back on Coruscant, the Jedi Council, especially Yoda and Windu, were very wary of Dooku's capture, knowing that he is still plunged in the dark side. Having such a high-profile target in custody could see prison escape attempts, seeing damages to Coruscant and beyond. Yoda senses that the dark side's influence is intensifying and suspects a conspiracy, but lacks proof of any information. But just like in Revenge of the Sith, the Jedi Council suspects that Palpatine isn't telling the truth. Their suspicion of Palpatine only went as far as to believe that he had potential ties to the Separatists, and that perhaps he was operating as a rogue chancellor and politician, helping the enemy to prolong his time in power. Because at the end of the day, all politicians want is their time in the sun. The war was doing exactly that for Palpatine. Little did the Jedi know that Palpatine was the mass mastermind behind absolutely everything. As for Anakin, under Yoda's mentorship and his experiences in the war, he had developed massively as a Jedi. He is more controlled and more intuitive. He attempts to reach Dooku, knowing that this man knows the truth about the Sith. When Anakin visits the Sith Lord, Dooku is intrigued by Anakin's potential and influence. Dooku doesn't give away any secrets, but instead acts with deceit and manipulation. He tells the boy a similar story to what he told Obi-Wan in Attack of the Clones, that the Jedi are blind to threats from within. He tells Anakin that the Jedi are looking in the wrong place, and that their beliefs are wrong. Anakin would relay all of this to his master. Across the galaxy, Ventress and Vos lead brutal, targeted strikes across the Republic strongholds. Their tactics are unpredictable, and the Jedi struggle to counter them. Jedi like Kenobi and Plo Koon become key figures on the front lines, while Anakin decides to remain on Coruscant momentarily to investigate Count Dooku. Anakin would constantly visit Dooku and try to talk sense into him. This carried on for months. Anakin made it his mission to visit Dooku regularly, trying to break through the Sith Lord's cold exterior. He spoke simply and clearly, explaining why the dark side was not the path, urging Dooku to see the damage he has caused and reconsider his redemption. Sometimes, Yoda would join Anakin, and together they worked to reach Dooku's conscience, reminding him of the Jedi values he once held. Yoda was the key to all of this. He was his master, and he instructed him in the ways of the Force. He explained to Dooku that he was sorry he believed the Jedi's morals had changed, and that they can work together to create a brighter future. Over time, Dooku became increasingly isolated and resentful. He began to realize that Sidious had found a new apprentice and no longer valued him. When Dooku learned of Ventress and Vos's new position as Sidious's true apprentices, he grew angry. He never meant anything to Sidious. He was simply a means to an end. There was no attempt to rescue him. He simply cast him aside and replaced him with other Force users. Finally, Dooku reached out to the Jedi, offering a deal. He would reveal the true identity of the Sith Lord if they promised him immunity. But when they brought this to the Jedi Council, they dismissed it as a last-ditch attempt for freedom, convinced he could not be trusted. Only Anakin and Yoda took Dooku's words seriously, believing that this offer might be the only way to finally expose the Sith's threat once and for all. Yoda and Anakin don't agree with the Council and think they are acting selfishly. They go to Dooku themselves and agree with his terms, explaining that his freedom will be granted. The Count then explains that Chancellor Palpatine is the Sith Lord. He had been manipulating things from the most powerful seat in the galaxy. Anakin was completely shocked by this, but it didn't surprise Yoda. They knew that Palpatine was suspicious. As they go to leave, Dooku tells them that Palpatine will either be in his office or at the abandoned industrial facility on the outskirts of Coruscant. Anakin and Yoda would go and tell the council, who were absolutely shocked and annoyed. Windu spat in defiance. He wanted his revenge. Although the council were annoyed that they had disregarded their wishes for Dooku, when they learned of Palpatine, everything clicked in place. Anakin, Yoda, Obi-Wan and Windu go to Palpatine's office, but he wasn't there. Following Dooku's advice, they then go to the Republic Industrial Building. This was a place no Jedi had been. It had no relevance to them whatsoever. Arriving, they located a ship docked in the hangar bay. As they search throughout the facility, they see drawings and schematics for all sorts of things. They were definitely in the right place. Then, they hear a loud bang in the corner as a bowl falls from the shelf and a hooded man is revealed. Anakin explains that they know it's Palpatine and he should surrender now and spare any more bloodshed. Palpatine was admittedly shocked and didn't know how they discovered his secret. He was now cornered, not knowing what to do. He raises his wrists and blasts bolts of lightning at them before igniting his saber and rushing forward. This duel was completely lopsided, but Palpatine didn't have any other escape plans. If he were in his office, perhaps he could leap out the window to the streets below, but not here. He swings with all of his might, avoiding being hit and providing offense when he sees the opportunity. As Windu pressed forward, fighting harder than ever before, Palpatine focused his attacks on Kenobi, piercing his defenses and slicing him to the floor dead. Anakin and Windu's emotions rose as they attacked even harder, and as Palpatine lost his step, Yoda took control of the fight and killed Palpatine, ending his reign of terror for good. With his death, Dooku would be released from prison as agreed. However, the Count would simply go back to Sereno. With Palpatine dead, there was nothing left for Dooku, and he didn't believe there was any hope fighting the war and didn't think they would win. He was old and he retired. As for the Separatists, Ventress and Vos take control of the army and begin unleashing a series of bold and devastating assaults on Republic strongholds. The Jedi knew they had defeated the Sith Master, and that now they were fighting the apprentices. It was only a matter of time until they won. Palpatine had always held back with the Separatist armies, knowing that he didn't want the Separatists to win the war, but instead to use Order 66 to kill the Jedi. Because of this, the droids were never used to their full capacity. Ventress and Vos would unleash havoc and the full potential of the army, and would actually see quite a few victories. They overran many Republic strongholds and took complete control of the western part of the Outer Rim. The Separatists were surprisingly in their best position in the war yet. The Sith lovers' arrogance didn't profit from this, and instead, they believed they could do absolutely anything. Emboldened by multiple victories, Ventress and Vos began to see themselves as unstoppable, gaining confidence in their brutal tactics. Seeking to cripple the Republic permanently, they plan an all-out offensive on Kamino to destroy the Republic's clone production facilities. This had been attempted earlier in the war, but Quinlan believed this was all the more reason to do it again. The Republic wouldn't be expecting it. As they launch their campaign, they have an incredibly successful first day of fighting. 2 of the key Republic cities on Kamino are destroyed, and the Separatists are well on their way to victory. Anakin, Yoda, and Ahsoka, with some other Jedi, go to the planet to defend the clone productions. Arriving with a massive fleet of reinforcements, one of the largest battles in the Clone Wars begins. The Jedi leave their clone commanders in control of the ground and aerial fights. It had been a long enough war to trust those like Rex and Wolf to lead battles. As for the Jedi, they hunted the Sith. Ahsoka, Yoda, and Anakin raced throughout the entire cloning facility, using their senses to follow the darkness. They would eventually locate them in one of the cloning production centers, which is focused on using the DNA from Jango Fett to create replica clones. Igniting their sabers, the fight begins. Anakin leaps forward and focuses his incredible lightsaber abilities to fight Ventress, while Yoda and Ahsoka take on Vos. The combination of Yoda and Anakin in the same lightsaber duel breeds complete destruction. They are 2 of the most proficient duelists in the history of the Jedi. Ventress's strength and power had significantly increased since the last time Anakin fought her, and she used Force Lightning to evade and strike at Skywalker. Her connection to the dark side had surely tripled, and she was beyond strong. But Anakin focused on his strength, remembering what his master taught him, and went to rely on his strength and not let his emotional weaknesses get in the way. As Anakin continued to press forward, he found a way through Ventress's defenses and killed her. With his lover's death, Vos grew absolutely wild and filled with rage. His moves grew reckless and not thought out. This, combined with the fact that he was fighting Anakin, Yoda, and Ahsoka, meant a certain death for the Sith Lord. Anakin delivered the final strike and killed Quinlan Vos. With their deaths, the remaining forces on Kamino would quickly be destroyed and the war was over. Order 66 would never be discovered, and so clone production would continue into the distant future, with the entire Republic believing the army to be loyal servants. After an election, the new Supreme Chancellor would be Padme Amidala, who had just given birth to her new child with teenage love interest Paolo. The Jedi Order would grow to become the most powerful they had ever been. No one could ever rise to take them down. As Yoda gets older and weaker, he steps down as Grand Master and he elects Anakin to take on the mantle, becoming the new Grand Master of the Jedi Order. The future was bright, and there was peace and prosperity in the galaxy. Hey guys, make sure to check out our saber shop Fantasy Sabers for the best NeoPixel sabers on the market. We have a bunch of perfect replicas and other insane Padawan sabers for sale. Check them out on our website, first link in the description below, and grab your own one today. If you enjoyed today's video, you must watch What If Windu Found Anakin on Tatooine, or What If the Younglings Turned Anakin Back to the Light. Please check out our saber shop, Fantasy Sabers, for the largest collection of replicas, Padawan sabers, and more. The link is first in the description. Thank you all for watching, and may the Force be with you.